Afternoon, everybody. It's the Ain't Freaking Man here, and I'm going to start today's video talking about property. The reason I want to talk about property is because property is economics. Economics, at its most basic, most boiled down point, is just methods of distribution of property. There are a lot of different phrases, there are a lot of different methods, there are a lot of different words and different systems for the distribution of property, but basically economics is distribution of property. It is not much more than that. What property is pretty self-evident. It's the things that we have. It is either personal property, which I or you or our neighbors own as individuals, or it is collective property. What we have commonly as collective property today is known as public property. It belongs essentially, theoretically, to the populace, to the citizenry, and is controlled by the state, the government. There's another type of property known as communal property. It's not really a different type of property. It's essentially the same thing as public property. The only difference between public property and communal property is a level of scale. Communal property is property that's owned by the community. It could be a park in your neighborhood that you're paying your homeowners association fees to take care of. It could be certain items in a house that all the members collectively pay for, like the kitchen or the bathroom, if you have a bunch of roommates. Communal property is that which is owned and controlled, and the use of which is agreed upon by the community. Property is incredibly important in economics, and not just because it is the center of the types of distribution. Because property is the core of freedom. The level of freedom that you have as an individual within a nation is going to be determined on how much freedom you have with your personal property, or even with the communal property, or the public property. You can have a system that is almost entirely controlled, and all the property is public, but as long as you have free reign over that public property with very limited restrictions, or no restrictions at all, then you still essentially have a lot of freedom, probably a lot more freedom in theory than you would under a system where all the property was private. The only thing is in a system like that, you have no control over your property. You have no control over what comes into your house. You have no control over who takes your things. When everybody owns everything, you have free access to everybody else's stuff, and everybody has free access to your stuff. The other extreme, individual property, you don't have any access to anything that's not yours, and you have to obtain it through whatever economic system you have in order to utilize it. And then, of course, there's a balance between those two extremes, and most governments fall somewhere along the slider scale in between those. Because it doesn't really matter what kind of rights you have if you do not have the freedom to utilize property. It doesn't matter if I have a right to watch television all day if the television itself is regulated. I may have the right to do so, but I don't have the ability to do so, so my right is meaningless. A government or authoritative system doesn't actually have to create a law about when and how items of public possession can be used in order to restrict your access to them. Creating something like a monopoly will accomplish the same thing, and because, again, it does no good to say you have the right to wear whatever clothing you want to if a government awards a monopoly to a clothing manufacturer, and that clothing manufacturer only produces one type of clothing. So at that point, it is a waste of time to say you have the right to wear whatever you want when there's only one thing to wear. At this point, you might say, okay, well, I might not have freedom over property, but I have freedom over myself. Well, that's not necessarily true. Because if you don't have freedom over property, then you don't have freedom over anything except pretty much, when you go to sleep, and what you think in your head. And even when you go to sleep and where you go to sleep could be controlled depending on the location of sleeping places and whether or not the government allows you to sleep anywhere outside of a bed that it designates for you. Because at that point you're using property that you do not have the authority or the permission to use, just by nature of the fact that you are standing on it. And you have the privilege that is granted to you by some higher authority. You don't have the right to anything. So personal property is extremely important. And that's basically property in a nutshell. For this video, I just wanted to pretty much establish that property is important, and I don't want to go too much into detail into the different types of distribution of property, because then we're talking about whole economic systems, and I believe each one of those warrants at least a video of its own. So we're going to end here. And for my next video, I will be discussing money, monetary systems, why they work, and where they come from. Thanks for watching.